Hello, Buckley Bookworms. So nice to have you back. We find ourselves here, chapter 14 in the city of Ember. When we left Lena and Dune in the last chapter, they had put their heads together to decipher or to unravel the mystery of or to figure out the set of instructions that Poppy has quite nearly obliterated or destroyed. They had thought about some things, they pieced together some clues, and then in the middle of the night, Dune has a stroke of inspiration. I wonder what that is. I bet it's going to be in chapter 14. Let's tune in now on page 178 to chapter 14 to find out. The title of this chapter is The Way Out. What? The Way Out? Okay. This is exciting. Let's do it. The next day was song rehearsal day. Everyone was let off from work at 12 o'clock to practice for the singing. It was a slow morning for messages. Lena had a lot of time to sit at her station in Garn Square and think. She put her elbows on her knees and rested her chin in her hands and stared down at the pavement in front of the bench, which was worn smooth by the many feet that had passed there. She thought about the mayor down in his room full of plunder. Remember, plunder means like stolen goods. Gorging on peaches and asparagus and wrapping his huge body in elegant new clothes. She thought of his great stack of light bulbs and just shook her head in bewilderment. What was he thinking? If he still had light bulbs when everyone else in Ember had run out, would he enjoy sitting in his lit room while the rest of the city drowned in darkness? And when the power finally ran out for good, all the light bulbs would be useless. Possessions couldn't save him. How could he have forgotten that? He must be thinking the same way as Looper. Everything was hopeless anyhow, and so he'd live it up while he could. She leaned back against the bench and stretched her legs out and took a long breath. Very soon the guards would storm down into the secret room and seize the mayor as he sat stuffing himself on stolen goodies. Maybe they already had. Maybe today the stunning news would come. Mayor arrested, stealing from citizens. Maybe they'd announce it at the singing so like everyone could hear it. Well, no one came with any messages to be delivered, so after a while, Lena left her station and found a step to sit on in an alley off of Calouse Square. She pulled back her hair and braided it to keep it from sliding around. Then she took from her pocket the copy of the instructions she had made just after she sent her note to the mayor. She unfolded it and began to study it. This is what she was doing when a little before 12 o'clock, she looked up to see Dune running toward her. He must have come straight from the pipeworks because he had a big damp patch of water on one leg of his pants. He spoke in an excited rush. "I've been looking all over for you," he said. "I found it." Found what? The E. I mean, at least it looks like an E. I mean, it must be an E. Though you wouldn't know it if you weren't looking for it. You mean the rock marked with an E in the pipeworks? Yes, I found it. He stood breathing hard, his eyes blazing. I'd seen it before, but I didn't think it was an E then, like just a squiggle that looked like writing. There are all these rocks that look like they're covered with writing. Which rocks? Where is it? Lena was on her feet now, bouncing with excitement. It's down at the west end of the river, near where it goes into the great hole in the pipeworks wall. He paused, trying to catch his breath. "And listen," he said, "we could go there right now." Right now? Yeah, because of rehearsals. Everyone's going home, so the pipeworks will be closed and empty. But if it's closed, how are we going to get in? Grinning, Dune produced a large key from his pocket. "I ducked into the office on my way out and borrowed the spare key," he said. "Lister, he's the pipeworks director. He was in the bathroom practicing his singing. He won't miss the key today, and tomorrow everyone will be off work." He did an impatient shuffle. "Oh, come on." The town clock struck the first of its 12 noontime booms. Lena stuffed her copy of the instructions back in her pocket. Let's go. The pipeworks was empty and silent. Lena and Dune went up on the hallway past the rows of boots and the slickers hanging on their hooks. They didn't take any of these for themselves. This was not a pipeworks tunnel that they were about to enter, they were sure. Like it wouldn't be dripping with water or lined with spurting pipes. They went down the long stairway and out onto the main tunnel where the river thundered alongside the path, its dark surface strewn with flecks of light. Dune led the way along the river's edge. As they neared the west end, Lena saw the rocky outcroppings Dune had described to her. They were strange, bulging shapes, creased with lines like the faces of the very old. Not far behind, Lena could see the place where the river disappeared into the great hole in the pipeworks wall. Dune knelt down beside a clump of stones. He ran a finger over their convoluted surface. It's kind of confusing and twisting and winding surface. Look here, he said. Lena stooped down and peered at the deeply carved lines. It was hard to see the E at first, because it was surrounded by such a tangle of other lines, and because she was expecting to see like an E drawn with straight strokes. But once she saw it, an E drawn with the curving lines, like a script, like cursive script E, she was sure it had been carved on purpose. It was centered on its stone and its lines were deep and even. So, from here we should look down the river, said Dune. That's what the instructions said, down riverbank to ledge. He lay on his stomach next to the rock and inched forward until his head hung out over the edge of the path. Lena watched him anxiously. His elbows stuck up on either side of him, his head bent down and nearly invisible. He stayed that way for long seconds, and then he shouted, "Yes, I see something," and scrambled to his feet again. "You do it," he said. "Look over the riverbank, like right down below us." Lena did as he had. She lay down and pulled herself forward until her head was over the edge. 8 feet or so below her, she saw the black water churning by. She tucked her chin in and looked at the riverbank. It was a sheer rock wall, straight up and down and slick with spray, and at first, that was all she saw. But she kept looking, and before long could make out short iron bars bolted to the bank, one below the next, almost directly below her. They were like the rungs of a ladder. They were a ladder, she realized. The bars provided a way to climb down to the riverbank. I mean, not a very appealing way. The bars looked slippery, and the water below was so terribly fast. And because of the dimness and the flying spray, she couldn't actually see if there was a ledge at the bottom or not. But the E was clearly an E, and the bars were clearly a ladder. This must be the right place. "Who'll go first?" said Dune. "You can," Lena said, getting to her feet and stepping away. "All right," Dune turned so that his back was to the river, and he eased himself carefully over the rocks, feeling for the first rung with his foot. Lena watched as he sank out of sight, little by little. After a few moments, his voice called up from below. "I'm down! Now you come!" Lena inched backward, just as Dune had, letting one foot dangle over the edge, lower and lower, until it touched the first rung of the ladder. She shifted her weight to that foot, clinging with cold fingers to a ridge in the rock, and lowered herself slowly until she was standing on the rung with both feet. Her heart was beating so hard, she was afraid that it would shake her fingers loose from her grip. Now she had to move downward. She felt for the next rung with her foot, found it, and then let herself down. It would have been easy if it hadn't been for the river waiting below to swallow her. "You're almost here," called Dune. His voice came from right below her. "There's a ledge. Like, one more rung and you'll feel it. She did feel it, solid beneath her foot. For a second she stood there, still clutching the ladder. The surging water was only inches below her now. Don't think about it, she told herself. She moved sideways 2 steps to stand next to Dune, and there in front of them was a rectangular space carved out of the river wall, rather like an entry to an entry hall of a building. It was perhaps 8 feet wide and 8 feet high, and would have been invisible from anywhere else in the pipeworks. You had to have climbed down the riverbank to see it. They stepped into this entry hall and walked a few steps. Enough light to see by came from the tunnel behind them. Lena stopped. "Oh, there's a door," she said. "What?" said Dune. The water roared so loudly that he had to shout to be heard. "The door!" Lena yelled back happily. "Oh yeah, see it!" At the end of the passage was a wide, solid-looking door. It was dull gray, mottled with greenish and brownish blotches that looked like mildew. Lena put her palms against it. It was metal and it felt cold. The door had a metal handle, and just below the handle was a keyhole. Lena reached into the pocket of her pants for her copy of the instructions. She unfolded it, and Dune looked over her shoulder. Together they squinted at the paper in the dim light from the main tunnel. "It's this part right here," she said, pointing. "Look, take a look." So they're looking at the very top there. Numbers 3 and 4 on their set of instructions. Can you make out any of those words? I think they're about to figure it out. Lena ran her finger along line number 3. This must say something down riverbank to ledge approximately 8 feet below. All right, well, that's what we've just done. Then 4 is something about bats to the water, find door, something. And then kind. That must be like key behind. And then there's this small green pan. Do you see a small green pan? Dune was still studying the paper. It says right. We should look to the right of the door. And quite easily, they found it. It wasn't a pan at all, but a small square of steel embedded in the wall. "A steel panel," said Lena. She ran her fingers across it and felt a dent at one side. When she pressed there, the panel sprang open easily and silently, as if it were glad to finally have been found. Inside, the silver key was hanging on a hook. Lena reached for it and then drew her hand back. Shall I do it, or shall you?" "You do it," said Dune. So she took the key from its hook and put it in the keyhole. She turned it and felt a click. She grasped the door handle and pushed, but nothing happened. She pushed harder. It won't budge," she said. "Maybe it pulls outward," said Dune. Lena pulled. The door still didn't move. "It has to open," she said. "We unlocked it." She pulled and pushed and hauled on the handle, and the door moved. Not inward or outward, but sideways. "Oh, this is how it goes," cried Lena. She pulled the handle to the left, and with a deep, rasping sound, the door slid away into a slot in the wall. Behind it was a space of utter darkness. They stared. Lena had expected to see something when the door opened. She had thought there would be light behind it, or like a path or a road. "Shall we go in?" said Lena. Dune nodded. Lena stepped across the threshold. The air had a dank, stuffy smell. She turned to the light and put her right hand against the wall. It was smooth and flat. The floor, too, was smooth. There might be a light switch, she said. She patted the wall just inside the door, from the floor to as high as she could reach, but found nothing. Dune turned left and felt on the other side with the same result. Nothing, he said. Very slowly, keeping a hand to the wall and tapping the floor cautiously with their feet before every step, Dune and Lena made their way in opposite directions. Each of them soon came to the corner and turned again. And now they were going deeper into the dark. They both had the same thought. Is the way out of Ember a long, dark tunnel? Must we go mile after mile in absolute darkness? But suddenly, Lena gave a yelp of surprise. Something's here on the floor, she said. Her foot had banged against a hard object. She knelt down and touched it cautiously with her hands. It was a metal cube about a foot square, so 1 foot by 1 foot. It's a box, I think. 2 boxes, she added as she explored farther. Dune took a step toward her in the darkness, and his knees banged into a hard edge. There's something else here, too, he said. It's not a box. He ran his hands along it. It's big, and it has a curved edge. Boxes are small enough to lift, said Lena. Let's take them out where it's lighter, and we'll see what they are. Come and help. Dune made his way to Lena and picked up one of the boxes. They walked back through the door and set the boxes down a few feet from the river's edge. They were made of dark green metal and had gray metal handles on top and a kind of latch on the side. The latches opened easily. Lena and Dune raised the hinged lids and looked inside. What they saw puzzled and disappointed them. Lena's box was full of smooth white rods, each about 10 inches long. At the end of each one, a little bit of string poked out. In Dune's box were dozens of small packets wrapped in slippery material. He opened one and found a lot of short wooden sticks, each with a blue blob on the end. Both boxes had a label on the inside of the lid. The label on the inside of Lena's box said, candles. The label on Dune's said, matches. And under it was a white, inch-wide strip of some kind of rough, pebbly material. What does candles mean? Lena said, puzzled. She took out one of the white rods. It felt slick, almost greasy. Why wouldn't she know what a candle was? Exactly. They didn't have movable light. They didn't have flashlights. They didn't have candles. Remember they tried to burn torches sometimes, but that had disastrous results. That's one of the reasons they couldn't go out into the unknown region. It's pretty wild. She just learned a brand new word and the object to attach it to. That's wild. Oh, they're learning something else. Look at this, middle of page 188. And what does matches mean? Said Dune. Matches what? And he took one of the small sticks from his pocket. The blue stuff on the end was not wood. Could it be something to write with? Like a pencil? Yeah, like maybe it writes in blue? But what's the point of a whole box of tiny pencils? Said Lena. I don't understand. Dune frowned at the little blue-tipped stick. I don't see what else it would be, he said finally. I'll try writing on something with it. On what? Well, Dune looked around. The floor was too damp from the spray of the river to write on. I could try on the instructions. Oh, no. Sorry. I could try on the instructions, he said. Lena handed them to him. Carefully, he rubbed the blue end of the stick along the edge of the paper. It didn't leave a mark. Whew, right? It didn't leave a mark. He rubbed it on his arm. No mark there either. Try this white stuff, Lena said, pointing to the white strip inside of the lid of the box. He scraped the blue tip across the rough surface and whoosh, Instantly, the end of the stick burst into flame. June cried out and flung the stick away. It landed on the floor a few feet off, where it burned brightly for a moment and then sputtered out. They stared at each other, their mouths open in astonishment. And there was a strange, sharp smell in the air that smarted in their noses. It smarted. If something smarts, it means it stings. How do you like that? So that strange, sharp smell that you smell, the sulfur that you smell when you strike a match, was what stung their noses or smarted their noses. Oh, where is it? All right. It makes fire, said Dune. And light. Well, let me try one, said Lena. She took a stick from the box and ran it across the rough strip. It blazed up fiercely, but she managed to hold on to it for a moment. Then she felt the heat on her fingers and let go, and the flaming stick dropped over the ledge and into the river. Fire sticks, said June. Are they what saves Ember? Well, I don't see how they could be, said Lena. They're so small and they go out too fast. Ugh, she shivered. This was not turning out the way that she thought it would. She held up one of the white things. Anyway, what are these for? June just shook his head in bewilderment. I don't know, maybe a candle is a kind of handle, he said. Maybe you tie the stick on with this string and then you can hold it longer while it burns. Well, it would still go out just as fast, Lena said. Yeah, said Dune, but that's all I can think of. Let's try it. With a great deal of effort, they looped the string of one of the white rods around one of the sticks. Lena held the rod while Dune scraped the blue tip into the flame. They watched the stick flare brightly, making shadows jump behind them. The wood turned black and the charred or burned fire stick crumbled and dropped to the ground. But the light didn't go out. Why do you think? Because the string itself had caught fire. As they watched, it sputtered and smoked and then burned steadily, filling the little room with a warm glow. It's a movable light, said Dune in awe. All Lena's excitement flooded back. Oh, and now, she said, we can go back to the room and see what's in there. They went back down the passage to the doorway and stepped inside. Lena held the movable light at arm's length before her. In its flickering glow, they saw something made of silvery metal. They walked slowly around, examining it. It was long and low, filling up the center of the room. One end of it came to a point. The other end was flat. Across the open middle stretched two metal strips. 4 stout ropes were attached to the outside, one at each end and one on each side. And on the floor of the thing were 2 poles, flattened on each end. Can you tell what that is? Can you infer what that is based on that description? I'm trying to think of something that might be long and curved, it's pointed at each end, made out of metal, and might have flattened sticks on the inside of it. I think I've got a pretty good inference. Look, said Lena, there's a word on its side. They squatted at the boat at the pointed end and held the flame near the word. It said in square black letters, boat. Boat, repeated Dune. What does that mean? I don't know, said Lena. And here's another word on these poles. Paddles. The only paddle I know is the one Miss Polster uses on kids who misbehave in school. Once again, she took her copy of the instructions from her pocket and consulted it, looked at it, referred to it, holding it in the light of the flame. Look, she said, right here. Oat must be boat. And the next part must say stocked with, I can't read backwards, stocked with necessary equipment, said June. That must be what's in the boxes. And then there's this. Lena ran her finger along the next line. Number 6. This word must be ropes, she said. Then lower. And then this word would be downstairs. Maybe it says head downstairs. Well, that doesn't make sense, said Dune. There aren't any stairs except for the ones that go up. He frowned at the word, and then he took a short, sharp breath. Downstream, he said. The word must be downstream. It must say something like, use the ropes to lower the boat and head downstream. He looked up at Lena and spoke in a voice full of wonder. The boat goes on the water. It's something to ride in. They stared at each other in the flickering light, realizing what this meant. There was no tunnel leading out of Ember. The way out was the river. To leave Ember, they must go on the river. Oh my gosh! Are you joking me right now? So here's what just happened. Lena and Dune made some discoveries, didn't they? This is the supply place. This is the way out. And they discovered a couple of things. Candles, a movable light, matches, like little baby movable lights that lights, yeah, you know how they work. Oh my gosh. And a boat and paddles. They didn't even know those things existed until just now. I wonder if they can figure out how this works. We're going to find out in the next chapter. So tune in. I'll see you there. Bye, guys.